And now it's Deborah Cobelt Live and the Little Italy podcast.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today on our Deborah Cobalt Live and Little Italy podcasts. And I'm honored to present to you Mr. Andrew Cotto. Thanks so much for joining us, Andrew.
Thank you for having me, Deborah. It's a thrill.
Yeah, I'm so excited to have you on. It's been a while, and we finally were able to put this together.
Yeah.
Andrew is an award-winning novelist and journalist. You are the co-founder of Appetito magazine. I love this magazine. We're going to be talking about that because that's a real passion for you. And there it is. There's the website there where you spoke with Rachel Ray. We'll talk about that. During the day, you also are the editor-in-chief of Italian America magazine. You're the food editor of the Brooklyn Eagle, but you've also been a regular contributor to the New York Times. You've written for Parade magazine. Gosh, so many others. You're going to have to actually tell us, our audience, yourself. But also, you've written 7 books, and you just completed your 8th. Wow! Thank you so much for joining us, Andrew.
Oh, I'm just happy to talk to somebody. I spend so much time writing that actually, verbal communication is really a treat for me. So we can do this all day if you want. But yeah, so my life as a journalist involves regular contributions to the New York Times, but I've also written extensively in the past for Men's Journal. I've written for Rolling Stone, La Cucina Italiana, the great Italian food magazine, Italy Magazine, Italy Segreta, a lot of Italian publications, Condé Nast Traveler. I've had columns at the Good Men Project and the Huffington Post. I've written a lot about parenting and music, and other lots of politics, technology, but mostly over the last couple of years, it's really sort of narrowed down a lot towards food, and particularly Italian food. Hence, AppetitoMagazine.com.
Well, you've been quoted as saying that Italian food is your muse, right? So is that because of the way you grew up? Let's like dial it way back. Talk about Andrew as a kid before Andrew was this award-winning novelist and journalist, shall we?
Sure. I think about those days often. And yeah, food was, I didn't know as a kid what I wanted to do in my life. I knew though that I really wanted to do something that impacts people. I always felt like I was one of those kids that was always trying to make other people feel included. Very much from my mother, and I was just, sort of inclined towards doing something that I felt was big. My dream as a kid, or my fantasy as a kid, was I was going to be a center fielder for the Yankees and give away my salary. That was my dream.
How nice of you. Instead of thinking of investing it and spending it, you were going to give it away. I love that. Okay.
I know it was a practical dream to have, but I think it sort of spoke to the ethos which I grew up with, which was like, I really felt like I was compelled to do something that involved other people as opposed to myself. I grew up in a middle-class town over the George Washington Bridge in the town of Glen Rock, New Jersey. I'm 100% Italian-American. My extended family was very nearby. My grandparents were in Palisades Park. My cousins were in Leonia. My other cousins were in Queens, in Corona, Queens, and we saw each other every single Sunday. My big joke was that I ate Italian food every day growing up and twice on Sunday because we get to my grandmother's house at 11 o'clock in the morning and leave around 10 at night. So there was lots of meals in there, and they were really joyous events.
Yeah.
It's important to recognize. When I cherish those events because people don't do that anymore. When I was a kid, Sunday was you were going to Naughty and Nana's house no matter what. You could didn't have a soccer game or a birthday party from some kid at school or some other obligation. You couldn't even be sick. Short of like hospitalization. We were going to my grandparents' house and we were spending all day there. And the cousins ran around together all day, and the adults had fun in the kitchen and the dining room, and then we ate and ate.
Okay. I got a couple of questions for you. When you were a kid and you were saying you guys were running around, did it always seem like the adults were yelling? Because I used to say, why is everybody yelling in the kitchen? They're like, we're not yelling. Like, did you get that or no?
My family was really unique in that it was they were laughing in the kitchen, they were dancing, and they were telling stories. We were a really charismatic family, I must say that we're all of us have talents and have great senses of humor, and there's a real sense of joy that ran through my mother and her sisters and my grandmother who'd be singing "Que sera, sera," just singing all day in the kitchen while she was cooking and cooking and cooking, and it was just really. I mean, there was some yelling at times. Don't get me wrong; it was entirely idyllic, but it wasn't like the classic stereotypical Italian family where the kids get smacked in the back of the head and the parents or I was fighting with them. It was really a joyful experience for me growing up, and it was so recurring that it stuck with me, and it extended into my adult life.
Yeah, ours actually weren't yelling. They were just so loud.
Oh,
Like if they were cooking, they were having a good time with it, and
oh, yeah,
that used to stick with me as a little kid. I'm thinking, what's going on in there? Until I became older and I realized, oh, they're just having a good time.
yeah.
So that would really stick with me. Food, there was always food. What about as a kid, like when you were bringing lunch to school? Did you have like the best lunches? Because I know I did. You grew up Italian, you are not bringing peanut butter and jelly to school. Am I right?
No, it was a little bit. Both my parents worked, so it was a little bit hard for them to pack
Oh,
lunch for us every day. I remember food being a really important part of my life as a kid. It was more sort of dinner. I think we did. I would get the traditional thing at lunch, a bologna sandwich or something.
oh, you did.
Yeah,
Okay.
maybe like leftovers. I'd get maybe Monday or Tuesday to have leftover like meatball sandwiches from the Sunday lunch. That wasn't that big of a deal for me growing up in the day. At night, though, it was different. We ate very well every night. My mother's a fabulous cook, and
Yeah.
I was just writing a story for Appetito for Mother's Day about how she taught me, my love of food comes from her, and not just knowing how to prepare food, but how to share it in a way that is convivial, that brings everyone around the table together, and it recognizes what a joyous event it's supposed to be. I mean, there's
Yeah.
moments we have dinner together where no one speaks, where you have to, and the
Yeah.
kids are to be seen and not heard, and the parents aren't communicating. I mean, it's like I think when the table for me is like church, being on the table
Yeah.
where I commune with people, and it's supposed to be fun.
Yeah. No, that's beautiful. And that stuck with you. And you went to college. And then I believe that you got your first job right there from college as were you writing? Am I right about that? Or you cooked? You were cooking at a restaurant there.
When I went to college, it didn't. I grew up, as I mentioned, but like by my mother's side, I was her little prince. She used to call me, and I helped her in the kitchen a lot. I would help her anytime she'd let me, which was often. And I didn't realize that I'd learned how to cook. I just knew I was hanging out with my mother, and I loved being with her. When I got to college, I went to work in a restaurant as a dishwasher, and about 2 days later, they'd realized that having conversations with me that I knew about food and I knew how to cook, so they switched me over to the line. I worked as a line chef at a really nice restaurant in the town I went to college, and the restaurant where kids would come with their parents when they were visiting. So
Right.
it was the nicest place in town. So I learned a lot there. I also learned there that I didn't want to work in a restaurant because it wasn't joy.
Oh,
It was that classic, stereotypical restaurant where the head chef and the sous chef hated each other. Someone's drinking too much. The servers are always pissed off. So I didn't like that tension of like,
yeah.
"Hey, orders up, orders up. Where's that deal, Oscar?" Like people screaming, and that wasn't for me. I loved getting there early and prepping in silence,
Right.
and
Right.
like what I used to do for my mother often. But I knew I didn't want to work in a restaurant. But also occurred to me I knew how to cook. Right. So, my roommates, were like, "Hey, God, you can cook. Here's X amount of dollars each week. You go buy all the groceries and make all the food, and you don't have to pay." And which is great for me because I didn't have any money. So I started like sort of, supporting myself through cooking, and came out of college, thinking culinary in some ways, but not so much as I was thinking about literature. I fell in love
Right.
with literature in college. I was not, your typical, writer as a kid. I was not a voracious reader. I wasn't, at the library. I never set foot in the library. And I was out and about, and whatever you want to call it. Not doing. I wasn't a great student. Right. I went to college to play baseball, and then that dream died. And along with my other dream to play center field for the Yankees and support kids with my salary, which is probably a blessing. And I discovered that I could write. I came from a family of storytellers. I came from a neighborhood of storytellers, lots of Irish, Italian, Jewish kids, Caribbean kids. And when we weren't like throwing rocks at each other or doing stupid things, we were telling stories sitting on the curb, or on the stoop. And, I realized that I really enjoy storytelling. It occurred to me that that's the device I've been looking for to sort of help people, to sort of communicate,
Hmm.
beyond my own interests. And I fell in love with it. But it was a little bit late for me. By the time I got out of college, the idea that I was gonna be a teacher and a writer, and I was gonna be
Hmm.
that English professor, English high school English teacher or college professor who also writes. Maybe I get like a tweed jacket or something. I don't know. And
Yeah.
it just also occurred to me that I chickened out. I went back to New York, moved to New York City. I was living on my cousin's couch. I was going to be going to school at night and substitute teaching during the day in the Brooklyn school system where you had some connections. and I just chickened out. Someone offered me
Mm.
a job in the music industry, which is also a passion of mine. My father was a musician, and then a music teacher, and my family's very much into music. My cousins are, a couple one is a professional musician, and others are really talented. I love music. I grew up not reading books, but reading like records, reading the liner notes. So
Right, right, right.
I think it's where I learned to read well. And I took the job, and because it had a salary, it had, you know 401k, it had paid holidays. I didn't want to be a starving artist.
Yeah.
I had a lot of them in my family. I was already living on my cousin's couch, for goodness sakes. I didn't want to have a can of tuna fish for dinner every night. This job also had a expense account, and they probably had me at expense account because I was like, really? I have this American Express card that I can go take people out
Wow.
to eat. So I started taking people out to eat. My clients were record executives, and people working under them. And my big thing with them was taking them to eat, and they loved it. Right? There was
Where were you working at the time?
in New York City. So I was living in Manhattan. I was
No,
working
the
for
company. Like, who
the
were you
company.
working for?
The company is called Simram. They manufactured and distributed compact discs and eventually DVDs for record
Hmm.
companies, film companies. So I worked for the company that did the manufacturing distribution, and I was the liaison with our clients. And
I see.
it wasn't a complicated job. Just needed to maintain the relationship. And I'm a relationship guy. I'm probably the most extroverted writer I've ever met. I like people. I like hanging out. I like having fun. A good time at parties. So entertaining people was like sort of like and being competent, of course, in my job, but also entertaining was like what was sort of differentiated me, I think. But more importantly, it's what brought me into the best restaurants of New York City. And this is
Hmm.
also the time when what we call regional Italian cuisine started to emerge in New York City. The places prior to the 90s, I guess, were more Italian American places, red sauce places, what we just called back then Italian food. But really, there's two distinct cuisines. There's Italian American food, then there's regional Italian food, right? And the regional Italian cuisine it's more sophisticated. It really is. I'm not saying that it's better, but I discovered it after a lifetime of Italian American food. I was walking in the restaurants, but they didn't have chicken parm on the menu anymore, or lasagna,
Hmm.
right? Or they didn't. The idea of meatballs and spaghetti was anathema to them. They were making food from Emilia Romagna, or Tuscany, or Rome,
Right.
Venice, or Piemonte, or even Sicily, which is a much different cuisine than we see Sicilian Americans making. And I really fell in love with it, and that's what really made me fall in love with the country of Italy. Because growing up, as Italian American, it's not uncommon for your ancestors and their children and their children's children, to not to want to embrace Italy. They want to embrace America. They
Right.
might
That's how I
prefer
grew
where
up,
they
and
go.
that's why I didn't speak much Italian as a young person, but they did. And as soon as I walked in the room, they switched to English. I don't think many families do that anymore, but growing up, yeah, they really embraced being American, and so I'm with you. I grew up in that way too. But what was the first time? What was the first time you went to Italy? And also, where is your family from in Italy on both sides?
Well, so that's why I didn't really have any heritage connection to Italy, because
Right.
my mother's family, the one I was close with growing up, is from Sicily. Right.
Mm.
And again, if Sicily was, I don't know, it was the thing that the boot was kicking. They
Right.
didn't talk about Sicily. We didn't cherish it. They weren't saying we got to go back. No one ever went back. There was no one ever took a holiday back to Italy. My grandparents never set foot back in Italy again. Right?
Yeah.
And they rarely spoke of it. They were proud to be Italian Americans. They were proud to be Americans. And so
Yeah.
they weren't doing that ancestry thing with us. So it wasn't instilled in us. We were proud of the fact that we were Italian. That was a big part of growing up. You guys are Irish, your food sucks. We're Italian. We're tougher and our food's better. Like we had the ethnic identity things going, but it was very much about Italian Americans. We liked John Travolta and Robert De Niro, and like that kind of hero worship of those people. We didn't know anything about Italy, but through my pursuit of regional Italian cuisine, I became very curious. I started learning about, mostly food from central Italy, Tuscany, Lazio, Emilia Romagna, and going to the restaurants, Po, Babbo, Barpiti. There's a whole, emerging restaurant scene. Even places like the Union Square Cafe have lots of really great regional Italian items on their menu within other cuisines as well. And I just fell in love and wanted to go there. I really wanted to go see the country myself for the first time as a food tourist, not going to Sicily, right? Just I went to Venice, Florence, and Rome, and Venice was amazing. I couldn't, the wonder of it filled me with awe. But I wasn't, particularly enamored beyond like the magical sort of, fact that this city floats and they don't have roads, they have canals and there's gondolas and it's really romantic and the light's incredible. Got to Florence though, and I was in love.
Yeah.
A
How
full day
can
of
you not
Florence,
be? Yeah.
a full day of Florence, staying at a hotel on the River Arno. I'm sitting on the balcony sipping prosecco before dinner, and I was like, "That's it. I'm giving up my job. I'm going home.
Oh,
Not going to quit like from the airport, right? But like make a plan. Because the desire to write, had been really starting to gnaw back at me over the years, right? So I gave up that sort of artistic dream I had, and had done well enough in the professional world to know that I could be comfortable if I took a chance. I was still young,
mm,
early 30s, and I was like, that's it. I'm quitting my job. I'm moving to Tuscany for a year. I'm not going to live there forever, right? I'm going to finish my first book. I've been writing it. I'm going to finish my first book, come back to America, and launch this dream of being a teacher and a writer. And that's what I did. I moved to the hills south of Florence, or
wow.
lived in a renovated barn, and finished my first book, The Domino Effect, which is somewhere behind me. And just reinvented myself at that fairly young age, and it's something that I am immensely proud of, and that it's created difficulties for me for sure. But it's something that I'm glad that I did, and know that it's brought me where I am today.
Let's talk about the domino effect. What was that about, and what inspired you to write it?
I really like the coming of age genre. It's sort of what I was reading lots of like high literature in college, but the books that sort of stuck to me most, that I felt could convey the most meaning to people, to get people to sort of to evoke mercy in people and foster empathy in people, were sort of those crossover coming of age books. So they're not like young
Right.
adult books, but they're books like Catcher in the Rye,
Mm,
To Kill a Mockingbird. That sort of straddle between, they're for teenagers, but they're also for adults who can talk to the teenagers about it. They're rich thematically.
they really are.
They're not the prom
Yeah.
date, right? They're about like how hard it is to be a teenager. Everybody calls those like the wonder years and their magical years. Man, I find them to be, and mine was pretty tame, but I think in general people really suffer as adolescents and young adults as they come of age, right? They start to understand what it's like to be an adult, and that the world is a complicated and often cruel place. They're exposed to things that most people, that the most aren't expecting, and so I love that genre. So Domino Effect is sort of like, it's been called a cross between a Bronx Tale and Catcher in the Rye, and it's about a kid from Queens,
Mm,
a really charismatic kid from Queens who sort of embodied a lot of the things I was talking about earlier about helping people and being generous, who ends up sort of getting screwed over for it. Because he sort of becomes an outcast in his neighborhood. He becomes estranged from his father, who was a huge figure in his life, who encouraged him to help people. And the domino effect is that if one domino falls, it hits another one, and blah blah blah. And that's what kindness does, right? Or the opposite, right? We affect other people the way we treat them, and that affects the way they treat other people, and so on and so forth. And it's a really fun book, and I probably the one I'll always cherish the most, because
mm,
baby, of course, but also think thematically, it's really covering a lot of territory. There's issues of race, there's issue of relationships with boys and girls, and rape culture. It's a family
mm,
story, and it's about somebody recognizing that their identity is important, of course, but other people's identities matter as well, and you have to see them for who they are, and appreciate that. And then if you're in a position to help them, right, and to encourage them and to empower them, then you should. That's sort of the big idea behind the book. You know,
would you say there's a common theme with all of your books?
Absolutely, but there's always going to be people who are struggling, right?
Yeah.
And then hopefully overcoming that struggle in a way that's beneficial to the readers, right? So I want my readers to say, I know what that feels like. My
Mm,
last book, the last one that was published, was called Pasta Mike. It's a novella, a work of fiction, but it's incredibly true to life, and it's about my oldest and dearest friend who died from leukemia in his early 40s, and how the loss of him in my life profoundly impacted me, in
mm,
ways I never saw coming, and then maybe start thinking there's probably lots of, because men don't talk about mental health, and men don't talk about loss, and men don't even talk about how important their friends are to them, right? So, I was, really destroyed by his loss. We were baptized together. We go way back.
Yeah.
We had telepathy. I could look across the room and see him and know exactly what he's thinking. And he'd look over at me, and I said, "Don't do it," right, or something along those lines.
Yeah.
And his loss, it was such a huge gap it created in my day-to-day life, because not having him there was like losing a limb. It felt like, and you always look for it. You always look for it. I always looked for him. I still look for him. It's been over 10 years.
Wow.
I still look
Yeah.
for him. So I wanted to really address mental health and men and the importance of friendship. Then all the other ones in between have these similar scenarios. Where people are, struggling, and the manner in which they overcome those struggles, I try to make as true to life as possible. There's no fantasy in my books. There's no gunfights. There's violence, because violence is part of life, and there's other things that people do on a day-to-day basis. But there's nothing fantastic about them. They're all very much rooted in real life experience, because I want people to see themselves in those characters in some way, and hopefully think about it. I remember reading books and feeling very validated, or listening to music and feeling very validated when the singer or the writer is touching on something that I relate to, and especially if it's, whether it's the feeling of what love feels like, or the feeling of having your heart broken, or being, making new friends, or losing friends, or struggling with your parents and not understanding them, generational stuff. I just think that my job as a writer, as a creative type — I don't call myself an artist, I'm a creative type — is to sort of, create those conversations and create those realizations in people that make them feel less alone.
Hmm. What do you struggle with most? Because you clearly are a very empathetic person. What do you struggle with on a daily basis, or weekly, or monthly, or whatever? Clearly, you still have a little bit of grief, or some grief going on, right?
Yeah.
For your friend. I mean, what is it that you wake up with and get that little ping?
That's a good question. Loneliness, is an issue. I'm divorced and I live alone. I have two kids who I get to see, but I'm at the age now where I don't see my friends that much, or see people that much. And I'm really trying to to break out of that, and to be more, socially proactive. To have
Yeah.
Sunday lunches at my house. And I keep touting how important Sunday lunch is, but but I haven't thrown one in a long time. You know,
Well, that's hard, especially when you've grown up with a lot of people around you, and those Sunday lunches and dinners are so important. And then all of a sudden, here we are, we're adults, our kids are older. You're sitting in your house or your apartment, and you're going, now what? That's hard. And that will bring on loneliness. I hear you.
yeah,
I feel that too. That's a tough one.
yeah.
So,
It's up
yeah,
there. You know my top 10? Or you one or two more? Should
yeah.
I be
But
down for this? It's like
but
therapy.
that's say it again.
I feel like I should be laying on the couch right now. This is feeling very therapeutic.
Yeah, but you know what I feel like when we reveal stuff like that, it helps somebody else who's listening and going, me too. So Andrew's not so perfect, huh? He's not this like award-winning novelist and journalist, and gets around, and is a co-founder of these magazines. So he's
Mhm.
got stuff too. I always feel like people can relate to it, because when it looks like our lives are just so lovely on paper, very often, we all struggle. So I
That's a
think
really
it's
good
nice to
point.
share.
And
Yeah,
I think that's one of the really sort of a more of a modern phenomenon, is that people like come to me and say, "Oh, Cotto, you're killing it. They think I'm like famous." And people think, you're like, are you kidding me? And so one of the problems I think of that impression people get, which is so easy to project because of social media,
yeah,
if I'm on TV or something, like that everything's so easy. It's not. Life is a struggle, no matter who you are. And we
yeah,
all struggle. So I think, one of the things that sort of often wakes me up in the middle of the night is this idea, like, is this legit? Am I a fraud? Is this like a imposter syndrome here? That comes in the middle of the night when I'm probably more vulnerable than I am during the day. I mean, I think, I'm typically a very confident person. But you also, like, you question yourself, and you wonder, am I doing what I want to do with my time? Because then as you start getting older, you start thinking, like, how much more time do I have left to really make an impact? Right.
very
We
true.
have lots of time to live. I don't know how much more time I have to be relevant
Yeah, that
beyond
has
myself.
meaning.
Beyond
That
myself.
has meaning to you and meaning to somebody else. I understand that too, Andrew. I
Yeah.
really do. So here you are, you're living in Italy. And then when was it that you started, writing about studying, and where that became your big focus? I guess it was being in Italy, right? Because it seems like ever since then, as you said yourself, Italian food is your muse. right? So was that the defining moment? You moved there and you thought, "Oh my gosh, this is what I, haven't this is what I've been missing for 30 years of my life. This is what I'm gonna focus on." Tell me about it.
Yeah, so like, I was when I first started writing, I didn't think I'd ever be a food writer. It wasn't my dream at
Right.
all. I want to be a novelist. I want to be taken seriously. I was going to go to graduate school, which I did. I wanted to be in the literary journals. I wanted to get a professor job or teach creative writing, which I did. But it occurred to not me, but my agent at the time after my second novel came out. And there's lots of food in the domino effect. It actually serves a narrative purpose where the father and the son sort of reconcile over like sandwiches. They're getting like roast pork and what's other sandwiches from the local grocery. And then the kid realizes, my God, my father and I have had sat down at this table and shared these sandwiches for my whole life, right? And like, that's meaningful. But
Yeah.
I didn't think of the food as a function of a plot device, but it was. And my
Yeah.
second book is noir. It's a series called the first one's called Attleboro Blues, a Brooklyn mystery. The second one is called Harlem. It's called Black Irish Blues, and I just finished Harlem River Blues, and the same character, and he's a cook. He's a poet and a chef, and he's not your classic noir character where he's like bang bang. Well, he's very thoughtful and and quite dangerous at times, but he's a really thoughtful person who had a very hard life. He had basically ended up like running away from home as a teen, and he's very wise. And he also made his living as a cook. So he sort of, you can always cook. Wherever you go in the world, if you know how to work online, work a stove, work, prep, and you can get work in a diner or a fine dining restaurant, or either anything in between. And that's what he did. And so he's not a particularly evocative character in that he shares, what he's thinking and feeling. That you get more characterization of him through what he observes. So, Publishers Weekly says it reads like Raymond Chandler taking dictation from Walt Whitman. So there was like the noir Raymond Chandler part and the poetic Walt Whitman side, and I was about
I
ready.
love that.
Oh, I'll show you the tattoo. It's right here, like across my chest. I was
Really?
joke on it.
No, I was going, wait, what? And then I realized, no,
I
I
thought about it, but like I was thrilled to have my name, those two names mentioned in a comparison to my writing, but also because it hit the poetic part as well as the noir. Right. So there's nothing hard boiled about them. And the food is a device to help him communicate to people. So the way he prepares food and shares it, which is a really important part of food. Yes, there is the technique and all the work that goes in and the procuring of the ingredients and everything that goes into making a great amount of food. But like you have to want to make someone happy with it to really be successful. So I will pass on this asshole chef making me exquisite food in exchange for somebody's mother who really cares, right? Especially if she's Italian, right?
Yeah, I got you.
There's a need to really want to make people happy with food that I think makes for the best food and the best restaurant experiences and the best home cooking, etc. You're just slapping it down and getting it over with and trying to fill up on it. You're missing a really important opportunity to connect with human beings. And again, that's why we're here. So this character in the noir series, Caesar Styles is his name, which is a very cool name. Uses food as a device. So there's lots of food in that. And after the first one came out, my agent said to me, "We're getting tons of commentary about the food writing in your book." And I was like, "Food writing? What's food writing?" I thought food writing was like, gourmet
Wow.
cuisine with recipes and chef profiles. And she's like, "No, you're using food in your book and it's functioning, in a way that helps the story and helps develop the character." So she suggested I start doing some food journalism. So I ended up writing, I connected with the New York Times, and I started writing a column for them on a fairly regular basis called Neighborhood Joint. It's no longer part of the metropolitan section as they folded it at certain after 5 years. I guess that's their policy. But in the interim there, I wrote about a ton of mom and pop shops. And again, it wasn't the prosciutto that they were making in the back or the sausages and the mozzarella, or if they weren't Italian. It was about the people who were making it, right? And what inspired them to spend a very difficult life. Working around food is hard, right? It's challenging financially for sure, right? Your inventory is perishable, right? And you don't know who's going to walk in the door. That was a hard part for me with the restaurant back in college, was that they were always freaking out about how many reservations we had, right? And where are they, right? We got an 8 spot at table 7, they're late, and then all the panic that incurs. It takes a lot. So I started really getting into like the people behind the food, and that's sort of driven me, into all these different parts of food. I of course I do recipes too, and I love to share recipes. I love to still, but I always set them off with anecdotes about where they come from.
Mm.
It's just become more and more a part of my life, and it's starting becoming more and more focused on Italian food. And then I was writing very extensively for La Cucina Italiana, which is the great Italian food publication out of Milan.
Phenomenal. Yeah.
Oh, the best. I mean, so many people say I have stacks of those still in my house, right? But they folded their USA operation during the pandemic,
Yeah.
and I took all of my ideas for Italian stories to other publications, and nobody wanted them. I mean, they were so busy covering global cuisine and progressive chefs and new techniques and other things that Italian food, Italian American food, just doesn't seem, whatever, wasn't of appeal to them. Um,
Right.
I went to my former boss at La Cucina Italiana and said, "Hey, there's an opportunity here. No one's writing exclusively about Italian food in America. It's the most popular food, Italian American food, Italian regional food, right? We can do something with this." And he agreed, and we launched Appetito together about a year ago.
I love it. So talk to me about Appetito, um, because you do many of the interviews there. Talk to me. It's an online magazine. It's fantastic. It's smart.
Thank
It's
you.
current, but it also, you've got a lot of the tradition in there as well. What's the thought behind it? And tell me about some of the interviews there. The Rachel Ray is one is fantastic. So let's talk
Yeah.
about that.
Yeah, being the only Italian food publication in America gets us access to the biggest names. We've had Rocco DiSpirito. He was our first story was him. He's a friend of mine. We had him on our podcast. I was out with him last night, and his new book release. We have Rachel Ray, Lady Bastianich. All the big name. Giada has been in our magazine. We have tons of like the all-star lineup of Italian chefs. Massimo Bottura, from Modena, arguably the world's most accomplished chef at this point in time. We get them all. We also have people who are really great home chefs, that I knew from Instagram. I found a really great food community on Instagram during the pandemic in particular. I did a reading series from my kitchen. Once a week, I'd read a passage from one of my books and then make with food in it and then cook the food. So I'd have a cocktail, I'd have a martini or spritz or whatever, and read, 8 to 10 pages of a food scene from one of the books. Then I'd go demonstrate that meal on my stove right behind me. I was reading from the kitchen. And I made a huge lot of friends in the food community, which is a very, very powerful community. They're supportive of each
Yeah.
other, and there's incredible talents. There's so many home chefs out there who cook just as high quality food as restaurant chefs and understand, procuring, etc. So we have a lot of them on our site now. So they're being published at Appetito as opposed to just publishing, recipes on Instagram with their own blog. So we really run the gamut. It's recipes, it's features. My partner covers news. He's a real journalist, been working in magazines, and publications for his whole career, basically. Understands, how you shape a newsletter every week. We have lots of travel now and reports from other cities. We're trying to just not remain a New York centric thing. It's so easy to do so. And we're covering the gamut. But most importantly, the idea behind it is that we want Italian food to function as a source of community, of
Yeah.
health, right? It's the healthiest food. The Mediterranean diet is the healthiest food diet in the world. There's no doubt about that, right? You drink tons of water, you use olive oil, you eat lean, small portions, you lots of seasonal fruits and vegetables, and that creates a sense of wellness. We have a health and wellness expert who writes for us on a regular basis. She's not on the staff. We don't have staff. It's me and my partner, but she writes for us as much as anybody. She's amazing, Mariana Cuomo Meyer. She her company's called Grata Wellness, and she is a health and wellness expert. And she tells people like, "Hey, it's the holidays, right? You might be feeling a little bit blue. I know I did, right? Get out of the house 4 times a day. Take a quick walk, right? Here's some
Mm.
foods that boost mood, right? Here's some practices you can engage in. So it's not necessarily always about the food, but it's related to it. And at the end of the day, what we're trying to do is create a community of people who are happy themselves, happy with the people around them, and celebrate life, around the table. Right?
Mm.
Eating with people to me, as I mentioned earlier, is like going to church. And I do need to do more of it. I do a lot of it because it's my job. I'm not almost every night, at restaurants and things, so I get that experience. But be with your friends. You know, I mean, the idea that someone is sitting at home, eating their dinner while scrolling through their phone, and eating something that they heat it up in the microwave, etc. Like cooking is therapeutic, right? Enjoying food with wine is therapeutic, right? Taking a walk after dinner, or taking a walk before dinner. There's so many things the Italians do in their routines, that we could adopt, right? And practice and benefit from. And the best thing about it is that it's not, you don't have to be Italian. Everybody wants to be Italian. I know you know that adage, right? But you can be Italian. You can live like an Italian, right? And reap the benefits of it, which are physical, right? Mental, emotional, right? Social, right? And that's really what we are after at the magazine at its heart. That and making some money.
Well, again, growing up Italian American, the first time I went to Italy and saw how my family and other communities were living, how everything was surrounded around the food. No, they weren't eating too much. They were eating, they were pacing themselves. And I realized how healthy it is with community, with food. So that aspect of your magazine has actually become something I look forward to. In fact, I'd love to interview her one day, if you
Oh,
don't
you
mind.
should. She's an amazing young woman. And that idea that sort of gave birth to Appetito was really born from I have these two novels. They're called here's one, the Italian adventure novels. They're called Cucina Tipica is the first, an Italian adventure, and Cucina Romana is the second. And they're really about an American who goes to Italy on holiday. He's depressed. He arrives there on
Mm,
holiday, spends a few days, and is like, you know what? I'm not leaving. This is just too magical here. Visually, yes. History wise, yes. Art, yes. But like everybody in Italy can eat well. There's
yeah,
no Whole Foods, right? Every
yeah.
market is full of fresh local ingredients that are very fairly priced. Wine is incredibly affordable. You can buy bottles of wine for 2-3 euros in Italy and drink them. It would cost 20 here, right? I mean, it's just like that realization of his that he can eat and drink every day very well. Not a luxury to do that. It's a right. Eating well in Italy is not a privilege; it's a right. And
Becca,
when he came across that realization, he said, "I can't leave." And the whole rest of the book is him trying to find a way to stay. Obviously, he finds a way because it's a sequel. But I love those books. In fact, I'm about to do an event in June at the Columbus Citizens Foundation here in New York, the very famous Italian American organization, where I'm going to read passages from the book, food passages, and then they're going to make the food in their taverna downstairs. So I'll read this
oh,
scene and they'll serve it, and I'll read another scene and they'll serve that exact same thing. Just to sort of make that spirit in the room, that feeling in the room of we're all enjoying this together. Often I'm reading, people are like, "You're making me hungry. You're making me hungry." And in this case, I'll just start feeding them.
yeah. I often think Italian Americans are sort of stuck a little bit because we see the way our grandparents and parents did it. Yet the American way, as you say, is so quick, fast, hardly even get any vacation time or time off. You're home and you're just heating something up. There really is such a disconnect. We've got to get back, which is why I love the magazine. We've got to get back to just finding a little time and making that a priority, to making our food a priority. In fact, next week I'm having someone on the show, and she's all about helping all of us grow our, fruits and veggies at home. Even if you are living in an apartment, that's so important. That's the way my parents did it, and my grandparents. Or we went to a local market in Newark, New Jersey, that my mom had gone to. Right, so everything was fresh. We've got to get back there because you're right. Our food, our mental health are completely intertwined. So you're go ahead.
Yeah, and it's also it's a matter of portions. Is a huge issue with food in America. People still equate more with more when it comes to portion. This restaurant has the biggest platters, of course, and then people feel obliged to eat all that food. I'm
Yes,
stunned.
they do. Yes,
Like,
they do.
I mean, this
Yeah.
is not to be regionally snobby, but like my father was living down south for a while before he passed, and I go see him, I'd be depressed, the obesity levels down there, and also just you go to a restaurant, and they we went to some like famous place. They have a meat and three. They call it meat and three, and they give you one meat and three sides. And I ordered
Yeah.
chicken and three sides. I ate like a quarter of it, and the waitress was like stunned. He was just like, what's wrong, huh? You didn't like it? And I'm like, no,
You
what's
didn't
wrong?
like it.
Yeah,
I know.
didn't like. I ate that whole thing. I'd be in the hospital, right? It's like
I know.
4 meals for me, So it's like I think the mentality around quality of ingredients is huge, right? Portion control, preparation techniques too. Olive oil. Olive oil is so healthy. I mean, it's easy to digest, right? It's so good. I do a spoonful of olive oil every day. It's just like it's the magic liquid. So there's an educational component to Appetito. I'm sorry, I'm perseverating on it, but it's a really important part of what we're trying to do because
It's
it
true.
affects everybody and it's welcoming. I mean, I'm all about inclusivity. Right.
Mm.
I love, the welcome table, as they say, and I feel like the world's problems could be solved if the adverse sides just sat down and had food, preferably Italian food. But I just think there's such a common realization of our shared humanity and the fact we all eat. Every culture has their food. How many, and then it's so funny how many similar dishes there are throughout cultures. I mean, Japan has the chicken katsu, right? We have a chicken cutlet. And French has everybody has like the fried chicken thing, right? Everybody has different types of ways of preparing things that are very similar with eggs or what have you. But like it's just so universal, and I do think of something that can foster wellness, humanity, understanding. Dare I say peace? I mean, is there gonna be world peace through food? What else is going to do it? I don't know what else. What else do we all enjoy together that we can enjoy communally?
Yeah, and taking the time to do it. And yes, we can all find the time. I feel like, we're kind of polluting our lives lately with just stuff. And we can find the time. And what's more important than the food we put in our mouths and who we consume it with? And that's why I really believe appetito is so important. I know what you're trying to do here, or what you're doing when I say trying, but I know the thought behind it, and you've been very successful. But
Thank you.
that's why, yeah, it's a beautiful magazine. It really is, thoughtful. Um, the New York Times, Rolling Stone. To me, Rolling Stone, that's like the big one. I hear the Rolling Stone, it's like, oh my God, he's written for Rolling Stone. You've had quite a distinguished career. Um, and right now, your focus is primarily, right, the magazine that you've created. What else
I'm
before we let
also
you go? Because there's so much. I just want to make sure we get in there before we let you go, because we only have a little bit of time left.
what I'm focusing on now is obviously Appetito. I'm also the editor in chief of Italian American Magazine, which is the magazine of the Order of Sons and Daughters of Italy and America. I really enjoy it. We're going to have Rachel Ray on the cover of that magazine next issue. We've had Adriana Trigiani and Chat Palminteri, lots of other celebrities too, and also non-celebrities as people who should be celebrated. It's a really great magazine. The Order of Sons and Daughters of Italy and America is really an organization I'm proud to work for because they're
Yeah,
what they stand for is the positive aspects of Italian heritage, right? So it's not
yeah,
the mafia stereotypes. It's not the silly stuff you see on TikTok and Facebook and Instagram where Italians are just they act like buffoons, for attention. It's like, it's actually Italian Americans contributed immensely to this country. And our heritage is
yeah,
a huge part of the American fabric, and we built this country in many ways, along with other ethnic groups. And celebrating that as a positive thing is something I'm proud to be associated with. And I'm also I'm a Brooklyn guy. I've been in Brooklyn for 25 years. I'm a local person. I believe that you celebrate you celebrate locally, then you go beyond that. So
yeah,
I'm the food editor of the Brooklyn Eagle newspaper since 1841. Speaking of Walt Whitman, he founded it.
yeah,
Um, and I run a newsletter with a colleague there, and then I also help them with their general cover. They throw these dinner parties, they're called the Brooklyn Dining Club, which I host. So I'm doing lots of hosting and other things around town too. I'm sort of getting out in front of the camera more as opposed to being in front of my screen, which I'm really excited about. So I really want to. I think I could probably reach more people through the visual medium than typing out 750 words over the course of a day and a half. So I'm trying to get in front of the camera more. So I have some appearances coming up. I think I'm going to be on CBS this morning talking about kind of what we were talking about before about the Italian lifestyle. Well, I'd love to have a show. I'd love to, like Stanley Tucci meets Anthony Bourdain and like go into places and talk to the owners and engage with them and eat. So and I'm ambitious for sure. It's not so I have a Rolls Royce, or a pool in my backyard. I just want to reach as many people as possible, whatever medium that is through communication and sharing, I will pursue. Ultimately, I'd love to see these books, this one in particular, made into a movie. I've had conversations and gotten far, but that sort of be the dream for me is to have my Italian books made into a film. Um, and and just keep
You know,
reaching people.
but you're in control of that, right? You've got your own magazine now. I really believe with social media, we really can create. And then other people, if we need to bring them on board, we see that. I think it's a great time to be a creator because we don't have to sit home and wait for, the phone to ring for someone to hire us as a writer, put us on screen, for an interview. We can design it ourselves and then get picked up, and or even go for our own funding. So I think that's great. And I think you're going to accomplish all this because look what you've done so far. Tell us before we let you go, your eighth novel. What is that about? It hasn't come out yet.
So it's called Harlem River Blues. It's the third in the Caesar Styles mystery sequence. Sort of similar in shape and size, where he has to endure some sort of challenge in his life, and it has all the the typical tropes of noir in it, but it's also, as I mentioned earlier, much deeper. I think of this as he's a philosophical character, and there's issues with reconciling the past. But there's a good amount of fun in it too. I mean, you gotta have the little bit of the sex and the violence and the other things, and the tension, of course, and the resolution. Which really it was hard for me to write because I've been so busy.
Yeah.
Back when I was teaching half my life, I'd be out all day teaching and I'd write in the morning. Now I write in the morning, then I write all day long. So it's hard to sort
Right.
of generate that creative energy when I'm spending so much time looking at a screen, right? And putting words on a page and then doing sort of the minutia of a magazine, which is like, writing captions and cropping photos, that's super unsexy stuff. But I really like that. And now that I'm done, I'm going to just revise it and send it off. And then I'm going to do the third in the Cucina series. So I'm going to do, that'll be the last of the Cucina. I'm going to wrap that one up. And then I don't know what I'm going to do then. I think I have a big give me for the culmination, I think.
Yeah, there will be something. Meantime, thank you so much for joining us. Anything else you want to let our audience know how they can find you and reach you?
I mean, I'm
What's
super social, and I follow anybody who follows me. I'm not trying to recreate some status. So I'm at Andrew Cotto, Cotto on Instagram, or mostly Instagram these days, but on Facebook too. Appetito, which is great. www.appetito magazine, APPETITO magazine.com. We have a newsletter you can sign up for. We have a really great subscription package. We have two different packages. One each comes with more gifts than the subscription is worth. Including this really incredible olive oil from Sicily from Buona Fortuna. We have one of my books comes in the package. Cucina Tipica comes into one of the packages. We have an Appetito T-shirt. We have this great herb set. So we'd love, we're a subscription-based magazine, so that's our lifeblood. So if people are interested in supporting an independent magazine that's doing what we're trying to do, please do so, and you get more than what you pay for.
Yeah. Oh, Andrew, I really enjoyed talking to you, and I hope, please, let's stay in touch. If you come out here, let's meet. And when I go to New York, I'll make sure to look you up, and we can spend some time. I just think what you're doing is so important. Keeping our culture, so for other people to understand, how they can live a healthier lifestyle through an Italian lifestyle, and it's not so hard to do. It's about, fresh ingredients, eating a little smaller, eating with people, finding your community. We've got to get that back, Andrew. We really do. Because too many of us, including myself, have sort of gotten away from that, being in this busy lifestyle, and it's not serving us well. But if we find that community, like with Appetito magazine, we can learn to sort of get that back. So thank you so much, Andrew, for doing all that you do. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Deborah. I appreciate being on your show. It was a pleasure.
Yes, thank you. So everybody, you can find my interview with Andrew Cotto on Deborah Cobelt Live, but especially on our Little Italy and Little Italy of LA podcasts. Look us up, write to Andrew, absolutely subscribe to his magazine. I intend to, because I want to get those free gifts too. So, I'm
sorry, Deborah, I totally forgot. And I have a website, of course, www.andrewcotto.com, andrewcotto.com.
Yeah, your books are on there, which is great. So you can learn more about the books as well. And they're beautiful books. So please take a moment and look him up at andrewcotto.com. So everybody, thank you very, very much for joining us. Please tell your friends about us, and we look forward to seeing you next time.